All right. Hello, everybody. Nice to see so many people here. First, maybe a technical question. Can everybody hear us all right and see the screen? Okay. If there are people experiencing technical issues, so just put it in the chat. We have our colleague Jasna watching with us, and maybe she can get you she can give you tips on how to solve the problem. So let's get this started. So welcome all of you. Nice to see so many people, some familiar faces, new faces as well, to our webinar on customer experience strategy and management. So today we are going to talk to you about how to use or how to trust your customer to guide you and to point you to where you ought to be looking. So we are going to talk a lot about today about customer understanding. We think you cannot strategize or manage what you do not understand. So you will hear a lot about that today, and to use those insights and that understanding to inform your roadmaps, your decisions, your investments. We have a lot of practical use cases and examples for you. And so this is not some high-level theoretical framework. We're just going to show you what we've done with organizations like yours to do exactly that. And then if you want to measure and report on, what is our customer experience like today, we are also going to show you how we use what we call CX metrics to measure and report on, the result and the impact of the initiatives that are being taken with these companies. So first of all, a little technical side note, so a small disclaimer in this webinar. We are not going to talk about AI today, so which in and of itself might be a welcome change for some of you because it's kind of everywhere nowadays. We are just going to talk customer experience. So maybe let's start with introducing ourselves. So I'm joined by my colleague Christine today, or Tine. I'm Tim, so I've been working in consultancy for 20 years now on digitalization, digital transformation, service design, CX, so with all kinds of different companies of various sizes that you see here. So, and these types of companies are also the source of the examples that we're going to give you today. And then, there's also Tine, so introduce yourself as well.
Hello, my name is Christine Dam. I'm a communication consultant in digital strategy, a digital strategist at IO based in Antwerp. I spent almost 13 years working for the large B2B company where I was mainly responsible for marketing communications across different countries and products and brands. And there I developed a deep understanding of how large, complex organizations typically communicate and where the gaps are. And then I made a move to the agency world. The last 13 years, I've been working as a consultant where I help organizations shape their digital strategy, but also help them navigate the change that comes with digital transformation.
Yes. So as we said, so these are some examples of the types of companies that we work with. So they tend to come to us with different types of challenges. But those challenges tend to show a couple of patterns. They always tend to revolve around the same types of pain points. So customer feedback or satisfaction that are showing some worrying signs, and you need to find out what exactly is going on. Companies that are growing really fast and, maybe they've done some acquisitions or, they're just really successful in the market, and they want to know how to maintain quality of service through that growth. We also have clients, that want to improve wayfinding because they have the feeling that their brand portfolio or their product catalog is growing really complicated for customers to navigate. And they want to know what to do about that. Content that's exploding, social media channels and touch points, websites, applications that are getting out of control. or maybe just internal silo working, fragmentation that starts to manifest itself in the form of customer friction, and they start to see that customers are suffering from that fragmentation, or general inside-out thinking. So maybe we're not listening to clients or to our customers enough. So what can we do about that? Or maybe they have a transformation or a replatforming or a redesign that they're planning to do, and there's a risk of customer impact, so they want to know how to minimize that impact. We also get customers who want to work on their digital workplaces, so internally for employees, and improve their experiences. So we're going to show you that some of the techniques that we use can also be used not just for external experiences, but also for employee experience. There are customers that say, okay, our market is going really fast, and we need to stay lean and mean, and we need to be agile in our, the way we move into new markets, but we have a lot of legacy and a lot of weight that we take with us from the past. So what is safe to leave behind, what is not? Or finally, maybe just internal politics, stakeholder management, competing agendas, where customer insights might be a factor that makes discussions more objective and fact-based. So all of these challenges kind of come together with in the projects that we do. And then we were wondering, because we see so many people here today, we were wondering, okay, what about you? So we want to keep it a little bit interactive. So we actually we've made 2 small polls. Don't worry, it's not too much, so they're just basically 1 question. We're, so let's start with the first one, and that is of the challenges that we showed you, like which ones are the ones that you feel as well? What is the reason you came to this webinar, and what is it that you would like to hear about? So we're activating the poll right now. So if everything goes well, you should be seeing the poll on the screen. So I think Jasna is going to put it on the screen. So do go ahead if you see the poll appear. Go through it, fill it out, and we'll see which types of challenges are present in the room today in this webinar. And we're waiting a little bit for the poll to activate. Yeah. I'm just getting out of draft here. Yeah, we seem to have a couple of small issues here. So let me. Okay. There you go. So poll should be live. If that's not the case, we'll move on. But you should be able to give your 2 cents. Yeah, it seems like we are experiencing some technical issues here with the poll. So okay, let's skip that one because we have a lot to talk about today. So let's move on to the actual topic of the day. If we're going to talk about CX strategy and CX management, so I think it's useful to first define a little bit what we mean with CX, or customer experience, and to set the field. The way we usually position this is that customer experience actually is it's a ladder. So this is not something that we invented. It actually comes from quite an extensive study that was done by Kantar in 2024. So they analyzed dozens of Belgian brands across, thousands of touch points to investigate, okay, what actually makes customers satisfied, and what is it that they appreciate about the experience with all of these different brands. And then you see that you kind of, you can divide these experience factors or these contributors into 3 buckets. So at the bottom, you have the factors that, make an experience feel efficient and smooth and fluid. So those are the things like, being consistent across channels, making it easy to do stuff for the customer, ease of use, simplicity of language. So the really basic, we would call these the hygiene factors. And it's really important to get those right, because if you don't, you can invest on the ones on top, but maybe customers will still show some dissatisfaction. So then on top of that, you have the factors that make an experience feel personal, so tailored to your person, to your specific needs. And that involves things like, being listened to, employees acting in a proactive manner, being remembered, not having to repeat yourself, being treated in a personalized way, etc. And then on top of that are the factors that we would call kind of the cherry on the cake. So the things that go beyond the functional, and that a company does not because they have to, but because they want to. So those are the fun factors, the pleasant surprises, the things that leave a distinctive memory in your clients' brains, and that make them remember you. So and we think this is a ladder. So in the examples today, we show you that these factors are not equal. Customers tend to prefer the basic ones over the add-ons and the nice-to-haves. So we're going to show you through our research that we've done why we think this is the case. And so when we talk about CX management, I think it's important to see that it's actually a different discipline than what companies typically call customer relationship management. The experience management is not the same. We think that involves fixing the basics for customers as a whole, and the customer base as a whole, or for a specific customer segment, but not for an individual. When you're talking about getting to know an individual customer, that's when you go into the discipline of CRM, and that involves different systems, different types of data that you start gathering about people. So today we're going to talk about the bottom of the ladder here. So that's more of like what we think is the field of CX and CX management. But what exactly does managing customer experience, what does that mean? So through all of these challenges and thinking about what you need to do as a company to get these basics right, we notice that it kind of always involves working on the same areas that you see here. So you need to work on customer understanding, obviously. Do I still know who my customers are, what the different customer segments are? Do I understand their needs? Do I listen to their feedback? And so that involves working on, understanding audiences, their needs, their tasks. We're going to talk a lot about tasks today. What do customers actually want to do when they interact with you, and the barriers they encounter while doing so. You need to, really get a deep understanding of that before moving into other areas such as design. Am I doing everything I can to make my customers' lives as easy as possible? And that sounds obvious, but it's not always the case, especially in bigger organizations. So that's where we talk about interactions and experience, and putting systems in place to allowing customers to do their thing. Prioritization, basically that's strategy, resources, portfolio, roadmap. Am I allocating my resources and my means as a company to what my customers think is important, and are we aligned with that, yes or no? Measurement is the fourth one. And so we need, through all the initiatives that we do to improve customer experience, we need to be able to measure the impact and report that back to key stakeholders internally, because if they don't see the result, maybe they will not keep investing in the things that you would like to do for your customers. And so we need to be able to measure ROI, impact outcomes of the things that we do. And then the last two are the softer ones, but that are often also important. So the first one being governance. which mainly means, are we able to deliver on the experience that we promise? Are our employees sufficiently empowered, equipped with tools and knowledge and decision mandates to do the right thing for customers, basically? And if that's not the case, how can we change collaboration and decision-making structures to improve that? And then the final one is, sometimes improving customer centricity also means working on customer-centric culture. Is customer-centric thinking sufficiently endorsed within the company and recognized and rewarded? And that means working on mindset and sponsorship and awareness, and maybe sometimes also change incentives a little bit, because what gets measured is what gets done. So often we need to work on that as well. And important in because management means controlling things and making them stable and predictable. So that also involves discipline. You cannot leave CX practices to individual heroes who lead the way, because if the hero leaves your company, then the knowledge leaves with them, and the practice goes with them as well. So if you want to be serious about managing customer experience, you need to create a discipline and repetition and habits that become ingrained in how you do things inside. And as long as you're a small shop, that's not too hard to do, being good in all of those things, because everything you decide, the impact is immediately visible. The feedback loop from customers to you is really short, and the decision-making structures are really clear, because there's not a lot of people to decide things. So as a small shop, that's usually not that hard to do, and to be customer-centric and to maintain a certain level of quality of service. But as you grow, you tend to see that complexity to get in the way. So maybe that's because your product lines expand, your services, your brands, you tend to grow. Maybe you've done an acquisition, which means that your customer base is expanding as well, and you're starting to serve multiple different customer segments that might need different things, and you need to know, okay, how to serve each of those well. As we said, your content keeps growing, your channels keeps growing. So that all of that is complexity that you need to manage. And internally, ownership structures tend to be more fragmented as well, and be spread across multiple peoples and divisions. And so that's how fragmentation grows, and that's how maybe also the disconnect with the customer grows a little bit. Which means that, okay, maybe we, what we used to do in a better way as we grow is more difficult now. So how are we going to do that? Because before you know it, decisions tend to be made at the table where the customer is not even present. So you might have discussions or people working separately in different silos. So we think with the type of work that we do, and the insights that you can bring in, is also a way of making people collaborate around what do we actually want to do for the customer as well. And so what we are going to talk about today is not about, okay, how can we reverse inside-out thinking into outside-in thinking. I don't think a customer needs to run your company, but it's more about restoring that balance between inside-out decision-making and outside-in, thinking in terms of the interests of the customer and the practical things you could do to restore that balance. So, and that's why we brought all of the cases that you're going to see today, is to show you exactly what you could do in a very practical way to do that. As we said, we're going to talk a lot about customer understanding, so that one of those 6, I would call them capability areas that you need to work on and keep working on. And we think that a core concept in that understanding is understanding what we would call the task. Is what does a customer want to do, or what is the outcome that they are looking for when they are interacting with your company? Actually, it starts there a little bit, is understanding the customer task, but also because as you grow as a company, you tend to facilitate lots of tasks for lots of customers. So it's also useful to see among all the tasks that you facilitate as an organization, which ones are the more important ones and which are the less important ones, because not all tasks are created equal. So getting those insights as well, could inform decision-making and prioritization as well. And of course, the customer does not exist. So customers tend to cluster around certain preferences. So understanding that as well is which tasks matter to which specific customer segments and what are the meaningful differences between those segments is also useful to improve experience, of course. And then the fourth one is, okay, if we understand the task, we could also move to understand for the customers trying to get stuff done is what are the areas of friction in that path? What are the things that are getting in their way and maybe lead to dissatisfaction? If we understand that, we know what to improve. And then the last one, and we think that's also really important, is that understanding and understanding that task and the importance and the satisfaction, is that aligned with the way internal staff and employees think about importance from a customer perspective? Because misalignment in that regard is often the cause of misinvestment as well. So over-investing in less important trivial stuff and under-investing in the important stuff for the customer. So those are the kind of things that we tend to work on in customer understanding and then venture out from there towards, design, which means journey optimization, improving information architectures and wayfinding, but also investing in the right content and communication, prioritization, which is strategies and roadmaps, measurement, so dashboarding, reporting, governance, which is internal way of working, basically, ownership structures, accountability over, are customers able to fulfill their tasks? Who's responsible for customer success, basically? And what can we do in terms of collaboration and tooling? And then culture, which basically is stakeholder management, aligning people internally with what the customer told you. So understanding the task, that's where it starts. What is a task? Basically, it's customers just want to get stuff done, and then there's stuff that gets in their way that makes it hard to do so. What is usually top of mind if we research customer bases like that, what is usually surfaces as top of mind with customers are the tasks that seem obvious. So things like I want to get a price quote, or I want to learn about your delivery times because things are urgent. Or maybe, give me your product specifications because I want to know if you have a specific feature that I'm looking for. When I get the product and installation manual, or, when I'm not really satisfied with the quality of the product, how can I get a refund? Or just, what I need to talk to a sales representative. So those are typical examples of customer tasks. And those mundane functional tasks. And that again comes back to the CX ladder. The basic stuff, the hygiene stuff, usually surfaces as more important. What surfaces as less important are the things or the tasks that the organization usually thinks are more important. So things like the jobs that we offer, our corporate values, our newsletter, our yearly report, etc. So those are typically the things that if you ask the customer, that rank a little bit lower on the priority list. And then finally, there's stuff that's not even a task, such as, visiting your website. That's not a customer task, or creating an account, logging in, registering. Those are not customer tasks, and those are things that you ask the customer to do to fulfill their task. So, but it's the latter things that companies usually invest a lot of time in to gather metrics, website visits, page visits, bounce rates, or account creation, which then counts as a conversion. But none of those metrics actually involve really understanding the task and the quality of or the efficiency of that task. And so that's what we're going to show you today, is how you can do that maybe a little bit differently. So I think the metrics that are of important, that there's 4 of them that we want to focus on. The first one is, as we said, task importance. So if you can kind of rank all the tasks that you facilitate for customers, and you can rank them a little bit based on your customers' input, you tend to see the stuff that's important on top, and then the stuff that's less important at the bottom. Theoretically, it should be obvious that you need to invest in those top tasks as well to make sure that they work well and smoothly for customers, and you invest a little bit less time and attention into the tiny tasks. But we will see that usually things are differently. So we need to close those gaps a little bit, because if the top tasks are not going well, and so you could have problems with customer satisfaction, which is our second metric. And so if you can understand where these areas of dissatisfaction are, and you can correlate, especially if you can correlate that with task importance, so you know what to invest in. If you see dissatisfaction on a top task, something that's really important for your customer, versus seeing dissatisfaction on something that's ranked lower, well, that gives you already an insight in, okay, if I have €1 to spend, do I need to invest it in the price quote journey or in the newsletter journey? Well, I think the answer is obvious. And so task satisfaction is another metric, really important one to gathering customer understanding. Then the third one is what we would call task effort, which is actually the journey. So people want to get stuff done, and they interact with your company, and they encounter certain interfaces that you need to go through, etc. So in the example of a price quote, that could be, as we often see in B2B, for instance, we're not going to show prices on our website because we have custom pricing, and you need to create an account or indicate to us who you are and how much you're going to buy before we can tell you what the price of our service is. So, that might be surprising to some customers. And then when they try to figure out why that is and how they can, solve that, they need to wade through a whole bunch of FAQs, maybe where they don't find the answer they're looking for. So they revert to trying to contact you, but before they can do that, you're giving them a chatbot, which is not giving the right answer as well. And then finally, they find a phone number where they can contact customer support, but they have to wait for a long time before anyone even answers. So it's the cumulative experiences throughout that task journey, let's say, that leads to dissatisfaction. So understanding where the effort is for the customer explains you a little bit the why behind satisfaction rates. So that's what we try to understand as well. And then, of course, we explain this as kind of a journey, which is based on actual customer behavior on their path in fulfilling a task. But what we see with lots of companies, especially companies that are sales and marketing driven, is we often see customer journeys that look more like this, which we would call a marketing funnel rather than a customer journey. But a funnel, that's about where you want the customer to be. So it's more of an inside-out look at journeys, while an actual customer journey should be observation-based. Outside-in is how a customer actually behaves to get things done and to a place where they want to be, not where you want them to be. And then the last metric is what we call task empathy. So are your internal employees seeing importance the same way as the customer does? Because if you see misalignments there, and we tend to research both aspects usually when we do this kind of stuff, and you see that there are often big discrepancies in internal perception of importance versus actual importance as indicated by the customer. And then that's where you see these, investments go the wrong way. Companies investing too much in too much resources into stuff that's trivial, and vice versa, under-investing in stuff that's really important for customers. And that's usually also where dissatisfaction is born. Stuff that gets in the way, that's not important, and vice versa. Things that are hard to find through all that noise that are really important. So, and yeah, to show you that, okay, all of, what we've told you right now, it's not stuff that we've invented, it's stuff that we see in our day-to-day in the projects that we do. So that's why we're going to show you some real cases right now about, top task satisfaction, effort, empathy, and how those insights can drive you to action and prioritization. So I leave it to my colleague Tina now. She will take you to a couple of projects where we've gathered some quantitative insights and used them to, inform decisions. So Tina, go ahead.
Yes. So first of all, we'll look into task identification projects we did. And here you see an example of a project that we did for a B2B client in the construction sector. And we gathered these customer insights, these top task insights across the entire organization in many countries, across many different customer segments. And what you see typically coming up all the time, it's a pattern that emerges and repeats itself over and over again, is that a few tasks account for the majority of customer value. In this case, you see pricing, installation, application, budget estimate quote, really making out the big demand. And these top tasks, they are very often basic and mundane, and it ties back to what Tim was explaining about the CX ladder. And these are the basics and fix them first. And very often what we see is that the stuff that stands in the way of these tasks and people being able to execute these tasks is what are the biggest sources of frustrations with customers, such as, for instance, what we call the tiny tasks at the bottom of the list. And these are things that typically the organization pays a lot of attention to. Very often the communications department cares deeply about them. But basically customers consistently vote them down the list as trivial, as irrelevant, as less important. And for this client, for instance, you see that the number one top task received as many votes as all the bottom 20 tasks combined. Now you may think, yeah, does that really matter? Is that a real problem? Well, it all depends. If you put too much emphasis and effort and overinvest in these, what we call tiny tasks, then it becomes a problem, because these tasks start to become standing in the way of what the customer really wants to do. Important is as such that the task insights, the top task data is used to make decisions and help you decide where to invest for the biggest possible return on experience. If we then look at task empathy, that's basically where we go and analyze not what matters most to the customer, but basically we analyze what do employees think is most important to the customer. And when we do top task research, we typically also do a parallel internal survey where we ask internal staff what they think is most important to their customers. And here you see an example of a recent project we did, where basically the gray bars show you what is most important to the customer, and the blue bars indicate what the staff and the internal employees had thought would be most important to the same customers. And notice the gap in both directions. You see tasks that are strongly overestimated by internal staff, but also tasks that were strongly underestimated, and that also happen to be the tasks where customers were most dissatisfied about. And if you look at the ones strongly overestimated by the organization, these are very often the ones with high internal visibility that also require a lot of effort by the organization, such as, for instance, complaints, dealing with complaints, dealing with incident reports. But equally, vanity tasks is a very classic overestimated task, such as About Us in this example as well, a very typical one. So the overestimating and underestimating is really something that comes clearly when you comes out clearly and when you do this type of empathy surveys. Now, not only overestimating can be costly because you start overinvesting in what doesn't really matter to the customer, but underestimation can be very costly as well, not only in terms of the fact that you have to deal with dissatisfaction and complaints, but also when it comes to sales. Here you see clearly that the number 2 top task was heavily underestimated by the organization, in this case, a client in the retail sector. And the second, so the top 2 tasks also required a lot of effort from the customers. Customers typically needed to physically go into retail stores to ask employees to enter an order into the system. And when the company looked at the results, they started investing in a digital self-service order module. And basically, they saw the turnover of their retail stores boosted by 10% almost overnight. So this indicates that not only overestimation can be costly, but also underestimation can be costly, and actually focusing on those areas can really benefit the organization enormously. Likewise, the same methodology can also be used to, in the ideation process, to validate ideas with your customers. You see here 2 examples, one at the left from the aviation sector, another one from the banking sector, where basically top task methodology was applied in the ideation phase. And maybe if you've been ever part of a brainstorm or been facilitating a design sprint, you will know that it's quite easy to come up with a lot of ideas, but the hardest part is knowing which one is the best idea to take forward and invest in. And so it's interesting and very valuable to validate ideas in these processes. In this case, at the left, you see that when asking the customers what ideas were most important to them, you see again what matters most to passengers is to move efficiently. And these ideas come at time to leave notifications, estimated time to gate. This is what really matters. And you see that the team, on the other hand, yes, they guessed some of these top ideas, but they also would have preferred, or guessed some of the ideas that received hardly any votes. At the right, you see an example in the banking sector for an app for 12 to 24-year-olds. And when they were asked what ideas they found the most interesting, well, they all relate to what teenagers and kids really care about, which is cash. Whereas if you asked the internal organization, they would have preferred and voted different ideas, such as the ones you can see here in the pie chart at the right. Top task insights are not only, can also be very interesting because we use them to look into different segments. And basically the customer, the real customer, doesn't really exist. Large organizations, they typically serve multiple audiences, each with their own needs, each with their own task preferences. And that's why we also use top task data for segment analysis to see which type of clusters emerge, which tasks are often grouped together, and is there particularly a sub-segment standing out that is interesting to act upon. And here you see an example of Stadbel, which is the Belgian government's statistics agency. And on their top task data, we did a factor and cluster analysis to actually give us answers on 2 questions. First of all, which were the tasks grouped together regularly, but also what are the demographics of the clusters. And it revealed 8 different clusters that actually gave Stadbel an entirely new way of looking at how real users were using their services. An example here at the right for cluster 5, more particularly, you see in the bottom left corner how the top tasks look like for this task. So the red bars show you the top tasks for this cluster compared to the overall for Stadbel as a whole, as an organization. And this particular segment, so cluster 5, didn't prefer Stadbel's standard publications, their standard graphs, their standard statistics. They really prefer direct access to the raw data, to the programmable APIs. So we call this segment the data scientist segments. And it helped Stadbel, seeing such big differences, to also build a strategy, both a service model that served specifically this audience, but also communication strategy towards that audience. This research was done in 2020, 2021, but the years after, Stadbel also made a lot of efforts and significant improvements by communicating to that audience. You see some of the specific public announcements to that audience at the bottom right that were done over the last years. Important in the area of customer understanding is not only understanding what the tasks are, seeing what is the task empathy, how do task preferences differ across audiences and the different segments, sub-segments, but also to identify and have a clear view on the areas of friction and the areas of dissatisfaction. Knowing that is really helpful to serve the customer in a better way. And if we look here at an example from a client in the government sector, you see that highlighted are the tasks where the customer was most dissatisfied about. And basically what you see is that the top task number 1 on the graph at the right, you see that that was the task where people were most dissatisfied about. Now, if you start looking at the other tasks that people were most dissatisfied about, we started to see a pattern. They all had to do with regulatory requirements and compliance. These are very important and interesting findings to take along to the next steps that we do for this customer. Important is also, as Tim has been saying, all the customer insights, they drive design decisions, they drive the way you measure, and that is reflected in journey optimization, information architecture, the way you write your content, optimize content, but also the way you set up your dashboarding and reporting. And here we want to show you an example how that was done in this case for Collect and Go, where top tasks were used to do the redesign of the website. You clearly see that the tasks, both the top tasks and, as we call them, the medium tasks in green, they have their place on the homepage. They are doable from the homepage. But it's not only important to measure, to use the data to build your architecture, your website, but to also measure accordingly. And you need to be able to demonstrate that your investments have paid off and that you made improvements. And in this case, what we did is we used what we call task performance measurement. So for each of the tasks that we know are important, people are asked to perform them with real instructions on the website. And we measure both before the redesign and after the redesign, so 2 different measures to see, did it actually pay off? And you see that big improvements were made on almost all the tasks, except for task number 1, where there was a regression in task completion rate, which is interesting again, and never assume that a redesign necessarily ticks off all the boxes. In this case, an issue with the information architecture needed to be addressed. So measuring is a very important discipline very good practice to do it before a redesign and afterwards, so you can actually show that your investments paid off. We also want to show you that top task methodology is not a methodology that can only be used in the area of customer experience, but also for employee experience. In this case, a digital workplace, an intranet redesign that was done for the company Intrabel and done in the context of a redesign, where in total more than 29% of the entire Infrabel sales workplace participated in the survey. And again, here what you see is that when you look at the top tasks, apart from some tasks that are specific to the context of this company, such as railway maps and plans, the other tasks and very typical digital workplace tasks, they are pretty generic and recognizable, such as company policies, procedures, way of working, who is who, number 4 there, find a person, and so on. So people consistently rank the predictable, the basic, the mundane stuff on the top. And that's why for digital workplaces, we can start from a master list and we complement it with what is really core to the organization. The insights were used to develop and redesign the intranet, and that also reflected in a very big increase in satisfaction that you see here at the right. Infrabel, and a satisfaction survey was done prior to the redesign, and at that moment a satisfaction rate of 56%, and it jumped to 69% after the redesign. So in the international CCI benchmark for intranets, Infrabel jumped to the 3rd place by really focusing on what matters most to employees. Another example here is what you see how by focusing on on effort, you can also make very big improvements. An example here is from the University of Antwerp, where we combined top task research with task performance usability tests. And you see here clearly that the number 1 top task, being study programs, was very hard to do. And if you see a result like this, where the number 1 task is the weakest performing task, you know where your next optimization investment should be. And that's also what we did together with the University of Antwerp. We created a new information architecture and also a content strategy that was really helping visitors find their way in the product catalog. And that also, again, we measured, we took the discipline to measure prior to the actions and after the actions, the satisfaction rate, and the satisfaction really again jumped immensely from 65% to 73%. So this shows that activities in the area of customer understanding really pay off and help you become more customer-centric in the way you act.
Right, thank you, Tina. So most of the examples that we showed you were mostly about, gathering quantitative data and insights, and how to use those to make decisions in strategies and roadmaps and designs, and reporting before and after. But you can also do it in a qualitative way, which actually involves talking to real customers and using those insights as well. So mostly that involves understanding customer journeys. So what are customers doing to achieve their task, and where do they stumble, and what can we do about that? So it's actually about reestablishing that connection with the customers that maybe got lost a little bit in translation, going out, leaving the safe zone of your company desk, and reaching out to customers to observe them, to inquire them, and see what they do and where they stumble. So the first example that we want to show you is the effects that you can have from just talking to a customer for 1 hour, one single customer. So the example that you see here is from Daikin, air conditioning system installation. So the customer here was the residential installer. So they came to us with the problem of, okay, we make lots of different applications for these installers that they have to use throughout their process. But each of these applications is created by a different internal team, and they don't integrate well together. And we start to see that starts to hinder the installer a little bit in their process. So just by interviewing a single installer, customer, we were able to not only derive a view on the entire customer process and customer journey as they explained it themselves, and the different roles involved in their company. So it's not just the installer, but that involves sales and planning and warehouse management, etc. So to get a better understanding of how they work, but also gather the feedback of that one person that we interviewed, and derive already a couple of key pain points from there that you see in the bottom layer there, the red pink layer. Just from that one interview. So, and I think based on just that small effort of talking to an actual customer, gave this company in this particular case a couple of specific working points to work on, and through the applications that were mentioned by the client, also identify which teams are responsible for these specific applications, because those are the ones that you need to put around the table. And have them collaborate on, okay, how can we solve the pain points that this customer mentioned? And that's just one interview. So what if you expand that to 15 interviews, for instance? This is a project that we did for the Belgian Federal Agency for recruitment of public servants. So 15 interviews with different customer subsegments, with internal stakeholders. And you see, as you do more interviews, that your system map and your understanding of the real customer journey really starts to fill up. So you see a lot of feedback here in the red post-its from the different types of stakeholders that we interviewed. But we gathered a really deep understanding of what is the actual customer journey across digital touch points, but also about physical visits. What does each group say specifically? What are their problems? And what are the key pain points really across all of these interviews that we need to work on? So that's what we used to work with that organization on prioritization. Which of the key pain points are more impactful for the customer, which are less impactful, also mapped to the organization, which ones are more impactful to the organization in terms of recurring costs, loss of time, maybe reputational damage, etc. So we used those parameters to prioritize pain points and then translate each of these pain points into a specific mission. So we created a portfolio of initiatives that we prioritized and put onto a digital optimization roadmap. And we were able to point specifically to, for each mission, where exactly in the customer journey will this improve things. So we're still working with that customer on implementing the roadmap, but this actually is what informed what they called their CX improvement strategy. All that from just 15 interviews, basically. We also use that in, we told you a lot about, the top task research that we do in a quantitative way, but what we usually do in these usability tests for a specific task is we organize moderated user tests on specific task instructions to see what customers do. And just by observing them, you compose your journey map as they go along together with the key pain points. So again, this is about documenting actual customer behavior across different touch points and seeing where the areas of friction are that you can then use to improve the experience. And of course, starting with one interview, expanding to 15 interviews, you can do a lot of that. But what if you want to scale up even more? So at some point, doing specific interviews with individuals, that doesn't scale. So you need to take a different approach. What we did here was we gave the test instructions actually to remote customers, and we asked them to document every step they took on paper with screenshots, with URLs, but also with a satisfaction rating for each interaction, and to send us back the result. So it might seem hard to do and to ask customers to do that, but if you ask them, you see that they're really willing to cooperate. And all the feedback that you gather and that comes back into your mailbox, you can use that to reconstruct your actual journey map with the feedback, with the satisfaction ratings, and see exactly, like here in the red boxes, where are the key pain points that we need to work on. And then the last one, I'm not going to stay on this one too much, but what could also help to increase customer centricity, especially if you see that you need to convince management of the existence of certain problems and raise awareness there, is to bring customers into your organization and have them talk to management. This is what we did here. It's an e-inclusion roundtable that we organized between federal government top managers and representatives of certain citizen groups that have a hard time in terms of digital skills to use public services. And just by organizing that task, these citizen representatives were able to explain how human contact is disappearing almost everywhere. And you see this not just in the public sector, but also in large private sector companies. Humans are considered expensive and they're replaced with self-services, with chatbots and all of these things. But the people struggling with digital skills have a hard time navigating through all of that. So this is another way of increasing empathy, is having people talk to each other, either by bringing the customer into the organization or the other way around, which is what you see here. What we did for Toyota is we brought managers to the floor to observe how customers interact with the showroom and with the digital screens that are in the showroom. And so the managers that we brought along, they actually said this was a really interesting exercise, very revealing, and they're working as we speak on a roadmap to improve the main pain points and the problems that they saw during the exercise. So bringing people to the floor and having them watch customers can also help. So these are all ways quantitatively, qualitatively to increase understanding, gather data, gather metrics, inform decisions and roadmaps. But what if you have the understanding and you know what should be worked on, but you're not able to change anything to it? So this is what we saw with this customer, for instance. This is really peculiar. If you see really high dissatisfaction with the customer on one side, specifically here about the ability to contact the person in the organization. And on the other side, in the empathy index, that you see that that problem is really well known and has high internal awareness, but still they're not able to solve it because there is a high dissatisfaction. You need to look into other places, like probably it's in incentives or strategy, or you need to investigate why are these people that know there's a real customer problem, why aren't they able to solve it? And that means looking into culture, strategy, strategic incentives, governance and decision-making structures, and maybe engage with management a little bit to signify that there is a real problem that's not being solved. And that is where a maturity assessment survey could come in handy, to allow your employees to say, this is a particular area where we're not able to move. And what does such an assessment look like? So we talked about the 6 capabilities of CX management there. For instance, in this case, you could see that the problem was clearly with governance and decision-making and empowerment. So they weren't able to act. A different client revealed a different area of attention. So with this client, the problem was clearly with their ability to measure and report on improvements. Being data-driven was a real pain point there, which caused them to make a lot of decisions based on gut feeling and intuition, and not being able to report on the effectiveness of the initiatives that they launch. So being able to reveal this in a company survey might also be, lead to change. Like for instance, with this customer, we made an action plan with them with specific actions for each capability area in understanding, in design, in measurement, in governance. So specific things to work on a strategic level, an operational or tactical level. So this might come in handy if you see that, things are problematic. We know that they're problematic, but we're not able to solve them. What can we do about that? So in summary, key takeaway, we're almost at the end of our webinar, is if you want to restore the balance a little bit between the inside out and the outside in, start with customer understanding, independently of the context of your project. So it might be just, you might want to prepare a specific workshop or just a design sprint, or you have a redesign project that you would like to prepare well and avoid customer backlash, or you're going through a multi-year transformation program. The effort that it takes to understand customers can range from the 1-hour interview that we saw to a really extensive combination of qualitative and quantitative research. Basically, the question is what is the formula that is right for you to get things to the next best decision, basically. So as key takeaways, what would we like to close off with is that in CX, I think your customer experience management and strategy, I think the primary artifact is not designs or journey maps or dashboards, but it's human stories. And it's being able to tell an insight through the eyes of the customer, backed with data that tell you specifically what's going on and where you need to intervene. And the customer task there is what gives that story context. It allows people to understand what the customer was trying to do and where they stumbled exactly. What is the main job here is to, as I said, inform the next best decision. So just do what's right to get to that decision and nothing more, but also nothing less. Choose a combination of which insights, which customer understanding formula is right for us at this point in time, and use that to inform your information architecture, so your redesigns or your budget cycles or your roadmap priorities. It will make the decisions better, basically. I also think it's important to point out that in CX, data is not about persons, but it's about collectives, the customer base as a whole, or specific customer cohorts or segments. So it's important to gather data on those as well, and not just focus on CRM data and what you know about individuals. I hope we showed you that gathering these collective insights can also help you in your roadmap steering and your improvements. And then, focus on the right metrics. So importance, satisfaction, effort, empathy. So all of these can help you. The things that we think are less useful in this kind of work and discipline are too much focus on analytics, page visits, bounce rates, what do they really tell you? Or even NPS, which we think is an attitudinal metric and not really a satisfaction metric. It asks your client what they would hypothetically do in the future and not about what they are actually doing. So attitude is not the same as behavior. So try to focus on metrics that reflect what customers actually do and value. And then the last one is, if anything, start with customer understanding, bootstrap from there, and venture out from there into design and decision making and governance, etc. So that's it. I hope that the technical issues have been resolved. If you still have a little bit of time, we would like to inquire you a little bit about all the things we talked about to you today. Which are the talking points that resonated most with you? So if everything goes well, you should see a survey, a little poll on screen right about now. All right, we'll give you a little bit of time to respond to that as well. Okay. So take your time, and then I don't know. So we are 5 minutes late. So, but I don't know if any among you have a specific question about things you saw that you would like to see answered. So maybe now is the time to ask that question. I'm going to leave my presentation here, come back to the room. And is there anyone with a specific question, or put it in the chat? We can react to that. Okay, we see a question from Jurian. Is it intentional that you use journey optimization instead of conversion optimization? So as we explained, like conversion is a thing that you would like to see the customer to do. So we're not saying that is not important. So please do keep investing in that. But that's not the same as journey optimization. Journey optimization is about watching a customer stumble with a specific problem and then working internally, finding the right stakeholders to work together to solve that specific problem and to get the barrier out of the way. So it's a different thing altogether. And so I think the message here is that it's not that you should do one or the other. You should do both, really. All right. We don't immediately see any other questions come in. So with that, I think we can close off this webinar. We hope it was useful to you. And if there are any follow-up questions that you would like to ask, please do send us a mail. Thank you all for
thank you all.
joining.